A tiny seed, a royal tomb. A question that sounds impossible at first. Why would a kitchen spice end up tied to death, preservation, and the afterlife? Inside an 18th dynasty Egyptian tomb, sealed for 3,000 years, archaeologists found a basket. Among the luxury goods meant for eternity sat cumin, the same seed you would toss into a pot of soup. Nobody can fully explain why it was there. Cumin's journey begins far from the Nile, in the stony soils and sun-baked fields of the eastern Mediterranean. Before the seed ever found its way to an Egyptian tomb, it grew wild in the Levant, today's Israel, Lebanon, western Syria, a region already famous in antiquity for its aromatic plants. Archaeologists combing through layers at Tel el-Daba, a late Bronze Age site on the coastal plain of Israel, uncovered the earliest known cultivated cumin. The seeds, still bearing their ridged shells, were mixed with wheat, barley, and lentils, evidence that cumin was part of a broader agricultural system by around 1550 BC. Botanists can pinpoint cumin's domestication zone by tracking these ancient finds. The Levant's mix of winter rains and dry summers created perfect conditions for annual herbs like cumin to thrive. Over generations, farmers selected for larger, more flavorful seeds, slowly turning a wild weed into a tradable crop. By the time Egyptian ships hugged the coastlines, ports like Byblos and Ugarit were already exporting baskets of cumin along with other luxury goods. The evidence from Tel el-Daba and neighboring sites is more than a list of seeds. It is a map of how a plant could leap from local fields to distant palaces. Each seed fragment, carefully measured and catalogued, helps build the case that cumin's story is one of movement, from Levantine harvests to Mediterranean trade, and eventually to the heart of Egyptian ritual. The question is not just how cumin reached Egypt, but why this particular spice was chosen for such a long and improbable journey. Inside the Museo Egizio in Turin, a lidded reed basket sits catalogued under the number S8248. Its contents, sealed for more than 3,000 years, were first recorded in 1906 when Italian archaeologist Ernesto Schiaparelli opened the tomb of Ka and Merit at Deir el-Medina. The tomb, dating to the 18th dynasty, was untouched. It was a time capsule from the age of Pharaohs. Among the funerary goods, Schiaparelli's team found baskets packed with a selection of dried spices, juniper, tarragon, coriander, and, according to the museum's own records, cumin. Garlic bulbs and blocks of salt shared space with a lump of animal fat, building a picture of a carefully chosen food offering rather than a random assortment. The basket's label, cumin, has persisted in museum catalogues for over a century. The inventory describes the seeds as part of a food condiment assemblage, suggesting that Ka and Merit were sent into the afterlife with the flavors and aromas of daily life. This is not a king's tomb, but the burial of a respected foreman and his wife. Yet the presence of imported spices hints at both status and the reach of Egypt's trade networks. The context is intact, the find is secure, and the basket's contents are documented in situ, giving this single deposit a weight that no other Egyptian tomb can match for cumin. But the scientific story is incomplete. The museum's identification relies on early 20th century descriptions, not on modern botanical analysis. No published microscopic or chemical study has yet confirmed that the seeds are truly Cuminum siminum, the culinary cumin, rather than a lookalike such as black cumin. The evidence is strong, but it rests on the authority of the museum record, a record waiting for the scrutiny of today's archaeobotanical science. For now, the basket of Ka and Merit stands as the only verified link between cumin and the Egyptian afterlife, raising the question, why would a humble spice, imported at great expense, be placed among the most personal offerings for the journey beyond death? Confusion between cumin and black cumin has trailed the story of Egyptian burials for decades. On one side sits Cuminum ciminum, the familiar kitchen spice, slender, pale brown, with a single curved ridge running its length. On the other is Nigella sativa, black cumin, also called black seed, chunkier, jet black, with a pebbled, star-ribbed surface. These seeds belong to different plant families, and under magnification, the differences sharpen. Cumin's surface is faintly reticulated and glossy, while Nigella's is rough, matte, and deeply creased. Yet museum labels, popular articles, even some scientific reports often blur these lines. The Museo Egizio's basket is catalogued as holding cumin, but that identification rests on early 20th century descriptions, not on modern lab analysis. There was no scanning electron microscopy, no gas chromatography mass spectrometry, no genetic fingerprinting, just a label and a century-old observation. Meanwhile, the seeds from Tutankhamun's tomb, so often cited as cumin, have been conclusively identified as Nigella sativa by their 5 deep ribs and distinctive chemical profile. The difference matters. Cumin and black cumin were valued for different reasons, traded along separate routes, and carried distinct meanings in Egyptian medicine and ritual. Without laboratory confirmation, the true identity of the Ka and Merit seeds remains an open question, one that calls for the tools of modern archaeobotany to settle. For now, the story hinges on careful distinction, not assumption. Cargo bound for Egypt did not travel in secret. In the late Bronze Age, the Eastern Mediterranean pulsed with the movement of goods, grain, oil, timber, and spices, handled by merchants whose livelihoods depended on the sea and the seasons. Cumin, harvested in the Levant's inland valleys, was bundled into reed baskets and loaded onto ships at ports like Byblos and Ugarit. These ports thrived as crossroads, where Canaanite traders exchanged local harvests for Egyptian gold and crafted wares. Amarna's clay tablets, written in Akkadian, record shipments of cumin, sent as tribute or trade to the Egyptian court, bundled with wheat and oil. Once afloat, the spice joined cargoes headed for the Nile Delta, destined for harbors such as Pi-Ramesses. Archaeological finds at these harbors include imported amphorae, their clay traced by petrographic analysis back to the Hauran and Syrian coast, regions known for their spice crops. From the Mediterranean, river barges carried these goods upriver to Thebes and Deir el-Medina, where even a foreman like Ka could end up with a basket of Levantine aromatics in his tomb. Each transfer from field to ship, from harbor to barge, added new layers of meaning, turning cumin from a local seasoning into a sign of wealth, connection, and perhaps hope for the afterlife. The journey of a single seed reveals a web of commerce and culture that stretched far beyond the Egyptian desert. Long after the tombs of Egypt had fallen silent, cumin's story continued to gather new meanings across distant lands and centuries. In the kitchens of Rome, the spice took on a life of its own, sprinkled over roasted meats, blended into wine, and set out in small bowls for guests at banquets. Pliny the Elder called cumin the best of all condiments, prized not just for its flavor, but for its supposed power to ease digestion and even lighten the complexion. The Greeks too kept cumin close at hand, storing it in tabletop containers much like salt or pepper today. It became a marker of hospitality and taste, but also a symbol of refinement, appearing in medical texts as a remedy for everything from stomach troubles to snakebite. As trade routes shifted and empires rose and fell, cumin traveled north and west, weaving its way into the folklore of medieval Europe. Here, its reputation drifted from the kitchen to the realm of superstition. In some villages, people tucked cumin seeds in their pockets or baked them into bread, hoping to keep lovers faithful or chickens from wandering out of the yard. The belief was simple: a pinch of cumin could bind what might otherwise stray. Manuscripts from the Middle Ages mention the spice as a charm for retention, its power rooted not in chemistry, but in centuries of storytelling. From Roman feasts to rural rituals, cumin's role expanded far beyond food. It became a cultural actor, sometimes medicine, sometimes magic, always more than just a flavor. Each new use, each fresh belief, added another layer to the mystery that began in the fields of the Levant and echoed in the sealed tombs of Egypt. Cumin's place in the tomb of Ka and Merit resists a tidy answer. The evidence points to a web of overlapping roles, each plausible, none fully proven. As a food offering, cumin sits beside garlic, juniper, and tarragon, familiar flavors bundled for the afterlife's imagined table. Its presence could signal a wish for comfort, ensuring the dead would not hunger for the tastes of home. Yet the basket's mix of aromatics also hints at ritual intent. Ancient Egyptians valued fragrant substances for their power to purify, to comfort the spirit, or to please the gods, and a handful of seeds might serve as a subtle form of incense, masking decay or marking a sacred boundary between life and death. Cumin's medicinal reputation, well known in later Greco-Roman texts, may have played a part too. Even if Egyptian medical papyri do not name it directly, the association of spices with healing and protection would have been hard to ignore. As for preservation, modern science confirms that black cumin's oils can slow bacterial growth, but the same has not been demonstrated for true cumin. The idea of cumin as a preservative remains an intriguing hypothesis, not an established fact. Status mattered as well. Imported spices were rare and costly, and their inclusion signaled wealth and access to distant trade. The basket's contents, carefully selected and sealed, suggest an act of care, a final gesture that blends practicality, belief, and social standing. But the story is unfinished. Without laboratory reanalysis of the seeds, the full truth remains just out of reach, suspended between catalogue record and scientific certainty. Even now, cumin's trail resists simple answers. A single spice, once rare enough for royalty, still blurs the lines between ritual, medicine, and daily life. Its presence in tombs reminds us what survives isn't just food, it's belief, ambition, and the secrets we leave behind. Share your theories below.